We are ready to begin whenever you are. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the California High-Speed Rail Authority's Board of Directors Finance and Audit Committee meeting this morning. If we could bring the meeting to order and ask the secretary to please call the roll.
Director Camacho,
Here.
Vice Chair Miller, Director Gametti, and Chair Tom Richards.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll start the meeting as we normally do. If we will ask for any public comments, and if our secretary will give you the instructions on how to address this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Before we begin public comment for the California High-Speed Rail Finance and Audit Committee meeting, I would like to go over some important information. For members of the public who have joined us in person and wish to provide public comment, you will be called on in the order we received your card. If you are joining the meeting via Zoom and wish to provide public comment, please use the raise your hand feature located at the bottom of your screen. Or if you are dialing in by phone, pressing the number 2 will raise your hand and put you into the queue. Speakers will be called on in the order their hands are raised. Once you are in the queue and your name is called, please click the prompt on your screen to allow your microphone to be unmuted. If you are joining by phone, we will call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. At that point, we will hear a message that your phone is being unmuted. Each speaker will be given 2 minutes to speak. I will remind you when you have 15 seconds remaining. When it is your turn to speak, please slowly and clearly say your first and last name, and if applicable, state the organization you are representing. Mr. Chair, we will begin with the in-person speakers. We have none. We will now move on to the Zoom participants. At this time, we also have no hands raised.
Meeting's adjourned. All right. Before we get into the agenda, I'll just point out for those here and who might be listening, today in our board meeting, we do have a construction update. And so item number 3 on our agenda in F&A, we will not have that here. It'll be presented in the board. However, if any members of the committee have any questions of Mr. Horgan or anybody from the staff or management, they can ask that here, and we'll give that opportunity when we get there. So with that, item number 1 is the approval of our April 11th F&A meeting minutes.
Move approval. Second.
Motion and a second. We don't need to call the roll. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Item number 2 from our Chief Financial Officer. Good morning, Mr. Annis.
Morning, Mr. Chair and board members.
What do you have to tell us about what did we ask about a moment ago? The auction yesterday.
Oh, yeah. There was a cap and trade auction scheduled for yesterday. The Air Resources Board noticed, I believe yesterday morning, that due to technical difficulties, that particular auction will be postponed. And at that time, they did not indicate a new date, but we'll monitor that daily and see when that appears.
Thank you.
Thought I'd also start out with a bit of a discussion of the governor's May revision of the state budget. So on Friday, the governor had a press conference where he announced budget revisions. The budget typically is a 3-year look, past year, current year, and budget year. In those 3 years, relative to the January budget, The governor reported that revenues were down about 9.5 billion general fund relative again to what was projected in January. That as far as translating into a budget problem, the budget problem identified in January was 38 billion of problem to solve, and now it's gone up to 45 billion to solve. However, the governor and the legislature did enact legislation last month that cut 17.3 billion of that gap. So that was called the early action package. And so what's reported now in the May revision as a remaining budget problem to solve is $27.6 billion. Again, this is general fund dollars. There were cuts proposed as part of that budget solution. But fortunately, no cuts to high-speed rails capital funding. So all of our Prop 1A funding, cap and trade funding, federal funding, of course, left untouched. So that's great news for the authority's capital program. So there were cuts in some other areas of grants that the state gives out to other local transportation, but they were fairly minimal for the most part. Some of the general fund solutions for local transit were backfilled in essence with those higher cap and trade revenues we've talked about over the last year. That's also bringing in higher revenue for other purposes. And so a lot of the transit, what might otherwise be cuts, are being backfilled with cap and trade funds. The governor also proposed some statewide cuts to state operations, which is mostly state staff funding. He proposed a vacant position budget savings to look at current vacancies across all departments and recognize the savings that departments have from vacancies this year. And also going forward, he has proposed a 7.9% reduction to state operations budgets as a permanent reduction. This will likely impact ultimately being able to fill vacant positions as well. So there's not a lot of detail on how that'll be implemented at this time. The budget documents say Department of Finance will work with departments in the fall on how to implement that. But no change to our January proposals. We do have a January budget change proposal to eliminate 62 consultants to be replaced with 67 state staff. That will save about $8 million a year because state staff tend to be less expensive. So that proposal, we think, has the support of the legislature. It was approved in the Senate Budget Subcommittee a few weeks ago. And on the Assembly side, it was heard that the chair of that committee voiced support for it, but they haven't taken a formal vote yet. But we think we have good support for that. So our January proposals appear to be going forward as well. So we'll, I think going forward, certainly report any implementation issues as the final budget is enacted and any changes that affect how we operate going into next year.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions? Thank you.
So with that, I think we can go through the normal PowerPoint. First, accounts payable and aging report. Happy to indicate no late payment penalties, now over 7 years without incurring a late payment penalty, no aged invoices for the March reporting period. The dispute summary, fairly similar to what we've seen over the past times, up a bit month over month, but down year over year. Of course, that's all 97% of that's the Dragados contract, as has been stated before. Looking down at the bottom of the sheet here, our cash balances, Prop 1A balance 120 million. It's down about 47 million month over month. We do note in the bullet at the bottom that the state treasurer had two Prop 1A bond sales in April of $400 million each. So we have a total of $800 million now in bond proceeds that should be credited as early as next month's report. Cap and trade balance fell 77 million month over month to about $2.75 billion. That does not yet reflect the February cap and trade auction, which will be 325 million. That'll probably be reflected in next month's report. And as indicated, the May auction is still pending.
Brian, do the Proposition 1A bond sales, are they as a result of something that we requested?
Yes, so every 6 months, Department of Finance does what they call a bond survey, and we submit our request for new bond proceeds. And we work iteratively with finance because they always want to, I guess, minimize the sale of bonds so that they're not paying interest earlier than they have to on issuances. But we work with them, and that's submitted to the Treasurer's office for the sale.
Where do we show the grant we got from the federal government, the $3.1 billion? Where does that show in here?
We don't show the federal cash on the cash management report because that is a reimbursed mechanism. So we always end up, generally it's cap and trade, sometimes 1A. We spend the state dollars first to pay the contractor. We submit the invoice to the federal government, and then they reimburse us after the fact. So we don't really carry a federal cash balance.
And the reason for that?
Well, that's just their requirement. They don't supply the cash up front. They prefer to review the invoices and approve the invoices, and at that time, provide the grant funds. We do show the federal.
On page 5, you show it there, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we show the amounts that are in the grant and the amount that's been expended to date.
All right, thank you.
Did you have something, Brian?
Right.
One moment, please.
Brian, I just wanted to ask one question about the bond issuance. The 800 million that you referenced, is that when the legislature awarded the 4.2 billion a couple of budget cycles ago, they separated it into a 2 and a 2.2.
Right.
And if I recollect right, I might miss which is where, but there was a 2.2 or 2 that was sort of set aside pending some things that we had to report to the legislature. I'm just curious if the 800 million that's been issued is out of that second tranche. Is it out of that second 2.2 or 2 point whatever?
Yeah, most of it is. We issue bonds for multiple purposes. One is the Central Valley construction, which is related to that 4.2 billion. So most of that 800 million is that.
Okay.
We also issue bonds for a portion of our state staff. We
Right.
also issue bonds for the bookend projects. So that I think that 800 million is a mix of those, but primarily the Central Valley construction.
So out of the totality of Proposition 1A dollars for this project, are we down to something like 1.4 or around there left to be issued?
It's a little higher than that. Yeah, I think the math on the Central Valley would be roughly 1.4. And then we have the bookend money left, I think at least 500 million for the LAUS and other projects as well, and a little bit for state operations.
Thank you.
Right, next slide, please. Administrative budget, not much to report here. We spent 6.2 million in the month of March. Year to date, we've spent 57.5, and that's relative to our $98 million budget. So it does, appear here due to our vacancies, we will have some savings, and that's, I think, really what the governor's proposal gets at a bit. For the current year, most departments have some level of vacancy and are fully funded for, no vacancies. And that money typically reverts, and, it gets used in the future, but governor's proposal would score some of that vacancy savings now. And then we'll again work with finance going forward on what the specific budget reduction is. But again, it's sort of cited as 7.9%. And So that's the kind of the amount we're planning for, if you will, barring any further information. Our vacancies is at the bottom here as well, 67 vacancies, which is about 15.6%. The statewide average is about 20%. So I think we're fortunate that this is coming at us now with relatively lower vacancy rates. You may remember it shows here a year ago, it was about 20%, 19.6. Before that, I think we've been as high as 30% or more when we've added some new position authority, and we've been catching up on the hiring. So we are relatively low in vacancy currently. Next slide, please. Next slide is our capital outlay summary. In the month of March, our total capital expenditures were $108 million, up about $5 million from last month. We're, through March, 75% of the fiscal year completed, and we've expended about 69% of that fiscal year budget. For each CP specifically, in March, CP1 was about 19 million, 2-3, 39 million, CP4, 10 million. I think it's interesting at this point in the year, if we look down as well in the capital outlay expenditure breakout, the bottom half of the sheet, there's a line that reads design build with TIA payments. And that shows year to date on the three design build contracts, we've spent $950 million. And that shows the next column over percent spent relative to budget. That's 108% of our original budget. So we did in the finance office bring down the budget request of the design build budget for this fiscal year to be more of a historical level. But the work in the field has been exceeding those historical levels. They've finished more structures, more workers have deployed, et cetera. So the spend rate's higher. It does appear, if you look at some of the categories below, like right away, the support contracts like the PCM legal project delivery support contract, those are coming in at a lower rate relative to budget. So there'll probably be some savings there. So where we look currently is we may come in about that budget level of $1.85 billion overall, that it looks like the DBs will expend beyond the original budget. But some of the other support contracts will probably be lower than the original budget. And so we may land around that 1.8 billion figure. We're clearly not asking anyone to slow work to make sure we stay within that adopted budget plan, but it does appear we'll likely land at near that anticipated level.
Brian, would any of the cost to the DBs be would change orders or settlement costs be incorporated in that number?
Some, yes. It's generally where we're paying it up front is for work already performed.
Mhm.
So if there's a change order on a future construction project, we would not pay in advance, but we would, that would go into our future year budget plans for
I understand
dollars.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's,
Brian, on
yeah.
some of these, the percentage is quite low, given that we're 75% through the budget year. For example, the bookend projects, what's with those? It's only 13% spent.
Well, and remember in part that a big chunk of the bookend is like 423 million at LA Union Station, and that network hasn't started yet. So there's none of that's been spent, as an example. Right.
What, out of curiosity then, if it hasn't been started, is it ever going to start? Do we get the money back? What happens?
Yeah, so you might recall that in the case of the LA Union, well, a couple of things. One, our bookend projects include the Caltrain electrification project, the grade separation in Northern California, a major grade separation in Southern California, and the LA Union Station. The grade separation and the grade separation project in LA is into construction now. So they're now spending, but they have not been spending, but now it's in construction. That's starting to move. The grade separation project in Northern California is completed, so that's closed out. The electrification project in Northern California is advancing, and we are now spending some of that. Maybe half or 2/3 through that, maybe. And then the big one that's pending is the LA Union Station one. I mean, I think that's part of it, huh, Bri?
That's right, yeah.
Most of that money that went to LA that hasn't been spent. As I recall, there was a presentation made to us.
Yeah.
Last October or something like that. And they were yet going to present to us a modification or a
Correct.
plan to go forward.
Yeah.
Now, have they not provided us that plan yet?
Yeah, that's the second part that I was just going to jump to. We entered a what we call the project management financing agreement with them. And they then informed us that they have budget and schedule issues. So under the PMFA that we executed with LA Metro, they're required to submit to us a remediation plan. And that remediation plan is still pending. Our team is working with them. Bruce and LaDonna DiCamillo in Southern California works with them on that. And I think we're expecting it on this summer. I think it's a June, July timeline, because they were looking at things like de-scoping some issues in the project and other elements. So that's got to come back to this board. And I think that's later this summer.
Right. Thank you. I believe we can go to the next slide. So on this slide, we show at the top all of our expenditures to date, about 12.5 billion. On the bottom, here's our list of all the federal grants we've received, so totaling about 6.8 billion. We have made a lot of progress in the recent time, and it's the other good piece of news is the federal government is really accelerating their working through new grant agreements. In just the last month, we have finally have a grant agreement in place for the RAISE grant for the Wasco State Route 46 grade separation. That project's being performed by Caltrans. So that has an asterisk at it, but we've just recently got the full obligation of that grant. The RAISE grant for the Merced extension design, that was fully obligated a couple months ago with the federal government. The 3 or 4 grants we got in 2023 are listed at the bottom of the table. All of those grants have what they call pre-award authority. So that allows us to start expending the dollars with state funds first. They don't reimburse yet, but they do allow us to start the work and be eligible for reimbursement on that work. So we're able to go forward on all those 4 things. And for that last one, the quarter ID program at the bottom, the 500,000, they did sign as well a grant agreement for that one. So that one's fully obligated. And so it's really the other 2023 grant awards, the RAISE grant Fresno Depot, the Chrissy grant for Shafter, and the federal state partnership that we are in active work with the federal government, trading language back and forth to get all of those grant obligations in place. And the goal is to have them all signed and executed no later than the end of August of this year. Next slide, please. Contracts and expenditures report. We have about $12.6 billion of active contracts. The month over month change was due primarily to what's been reported in the last couple CO reports that some of the project construction manager contracts were extended, Wong Harris and Arcadis. And there was also a new contract with AT&T for some of the utility relocations. The small business utilization percentage stayed the same month over month at 23.4%. And of course, we give further detail on the bottom half of the page by category of small business. At last month's full board meeting, there was some discussion about reporting of small business utilization by contract. And I just wanted to flag that in our detailed reports that are publicly posted as well. If we go to the next slide, we do have a report that's called the contract and expenditure report. It's the last of our detailed reports we put on our website. And I've just sort of done a screenshot of part of the first page of that report. And it's just to illustrate that we do list alphabetically all the contracts we have. And then at the right column here, where applicable, we're showing their small business utilization rate, and that's a cumulative number. One thing to note here is we do have a lot of not applicables, and you'll see, that's other state departments, that's partners like BNSF Railway here that we're working with through a contractual relationship because they're partners on the project. It's not a competitively bid type situation. Some of our direct contracts are with small businesses. So the percentage there reflects at 100%. If, it's the small businesses, the entirety of the contract. And then we list the other percentages, and AECom here is, I guess, first alphabetically at 33.5%. So this is where the numbers from this detailed report get rolled up in the PowerPoint, but just wanted to, as a follow-up to last board meeting, sort of publicly notice we have this detailed report as well. All right, next slide.
Brian, before you go to the next slide, is there a place, I don't think I remember in our packets ever seeing, is there a column that could be put here that would identify the total amount that we spent from the outset?
Yeah, and that is in the detailed report. So this was legible on a PowerPoint. I kind of zoomed in.
Yeah,
But in our contract and expenditure report, it's a 12-page document. There we have a contract amount column, we have an actual expenditure to date column, and we have a remaining balance column.
could we put that up in the summaries here then?
Yeah, I'm
That'd
happy.
be great. I think that's good numbers for us to see. Thank you.
So what is up now is the contingency summary. We list various contingencies, the 3 contingencies that are specifically designated for each CP individually. Total remaining balance is $940 million. We have other contingencies unallocated, et cetera, such that the total remaining balance of all contingencies is a little bit shy of $2 billion. We report at the bottom here the larger actions that are over 25 million. And so in the month of March, the Arcadis PCM contract was extended at a cost of 75 million. I think that was in last month's CEO report as well.
Brian, on that, the arbitration case that we weren't successful on, will that come out of the contingency?
Yes.
And when will we report that?
Well, the amount, so the amount of the payment is being negotiated right now is my understanding. So it hasn't gone through governance, internal approval yet, but I know after the arbitration decision that went to further work to negotiate or to work out the amount of the payment.
What's the approximate number?
It's on the order of 130 million.
So that'll come off of the 940.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Go to the next slide. So it's our flash report, the initial look at April data. Month over month, it looks like we'll be up a bit at total capital expenditure, about 123 million. On the design build side, looks like it's up a couple million overall, with CP1 being the largest jump, going from about 19 million to about 31 million. CP4, it's showing here going down quite a bit from 10 million to 2 million. I suspect just being the sign of the nature of that project wrapping up. Vacancy rate stayed about the same. And at the bottom right here, we just give an update on where we are with federal applications. And there's a more detailed summary of this in the CEO report at full board. But we do have currently 3 new grant applications we've submitted in recent months that total $312 million. They include a grant request from the MEGA program for the Merced Station construction. We also have a RAISE grant that would cover the 100% design cost of the Merced Station. And lastly, there's a U.S. Department of Energy grant program called GRIP for Grid Resilience. And we applied last year. We did not receive that, but we debriefed. And this year we've been encouraged to apply by the Department of Energy. That's a $60 million grant request that would fund our solar and battery infrastructure on the Central Valley construction. So we're happy to resubmit that one. And our experience has been on some of these grant applications that it sometimes takes more than one try. We did, for example, apply multiple times for the Fresno Historic Depot and then received an award of that. So we do always request debriefs, whether we're successful or unsuccessful with the federal grant application, and take that information to improve the application next time. And that's what we're doing again off our successful 2023 cycle to have some further success in 24. That concludes my report.
Any questions for Mr. Ennis? Thank you, Brian. As I mentioned earlier, we will not have a construction update today other than, are there any questions for, okay. Yeah, no question. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that will then conclude the business for this committee today. Please join us if you can at our board meeting at beginning at 9:30 this morning. In the interim, this committee is adjourned.